You might have been told that 1 in 4 retirees is a millionaire, but here's the uncomfortable question that no one asks. If you take their house out of the equation, are they still a millionaire? Because according to this data, millions of retirees only cross the $1 million mark on paper, and that difference can completely change how retirement really feels to them. Here's why this matters. You can have a 7-figure net worth and still worry about cash flow every single month. You can be labeled as wealthy while your money is still trapped in your house, which isn't going to be able to pay your bills. So in this video, we're going to answer a very specific question. How many retirees are actually millionaires without their homes? And how should that affect the framework that you use when you're looking at your retirement income? But before we do that, we need to talk about those millionaire retiree headlines and what they're really measuring. When the Federal Reserve tracks household wealth through its survey of consumer finances, it defines net worth as everything you own minus everything you owe. That includes your retirement accounts, savings, investments, and your home equity. So when you see a statistic saying that a large share of retirees are millionaires, that number almost always includes the value of their primary residence, or the net value. And this is where the confusion can start. A house is absolutely real wealth, don't get me wrong. It provides security, stability, and often, peace of mind. But it doesn't automatically function like a retirement paycheck. You can't easily tap into it for groceries, travel, or to cover your healthcare expenses without having to make a major decision, like selling, downsizing, or borrowing against it. That's why many professionals in the wealth management world use a different definition. Instead of net worth, they focus on investable or financial assets, things like IRAs, 401ks, brokerage accounts, or cash accounts. Even large industry wealth reports don't count your house equity when they say someone is a millionaire. What they mean is investable assets of $1 million or more, excluding your primary residence and other non-liquid, non-revenue producing assets. So let's take a look at the actual numbers. Using the Federal Reserve's 2022 Survey of Consumer Finances, which is the most recent data set available, we can separate retirees into 3 different categories. For simplicity, we'll define retirees as households where the primary individual is age 65 or older. First, if we use the broad headline definition, the total net worth of at least $1 million, including their home, about 26% of retiree households qualify. That's roughly 9.7 million households. Second, if we remove home equity and ask how many retirees still have $1 million left, that number drops to about 18%, or roughly 6.6 million households. Third, if we narrow the definition further and look only at financial assets such as investments, savings, and retirement accounts, the share of retiree millionaires falls again to about 14%, or 5.3 million households. That gap is the heart of this video. Roughly 3 million retiree households are considered millionaires only because of their house equity. Without the home, they would not meet that threshold. This is why this type of labeling can be so misleading to the general public. Now, to make this more concrete for you, let's look at the median retiree household, the one that's right in the middle, right? Not the average. And for retirees age 65 or older, the median net worth is about $389,000. But when you break that number down, the picture changes. Median financial assets are only about $88,000, which means the median home equity is closer to $180,000. In other words, the typical retiree, a very large portion of their wealth is tied up in their primary home. And that's why so many retirees can feel financially secure on paper, such as their net worth, but still hesitate when it comes to spending in retirement. Their wealth exists, it's just not easily accessible. I call this the millionaire mirage. Higher net worth driven by housing paired with limited liquid income sources. This distinction matters in real life because, as you know, retirement isn't funded by your net worth, it's funded by cash flow. You don't live on a balance sheet, you live on income. So to turn your home equity into spendable money, you have to either sell, downsize, rent out a portion of your home, or borrow against it. Each option can make sense in its right situation and within the right strategy, but none of them are automatic, easy, and they all involve trade-offs. That's why I often say this. A house is security, a portfolio is your paycheck. So your portfolio is what funds your lifestyle month after month in retirement. We get that. Your home gives you stability and maybe options later in life, but it doesn't generate income by default. And just to put an example to this, let's consider 2 retirees with the same $1 million net worth. One has an $850,000 home and $150,000 in investments. The other retiree has a $300,000 home and $700,000 in investments. It's the same net worth on paper, but completely different retirement experiences. This latter has 4.5 times the amount of retirement income that the first retiree has. One is house rich and cash constrained. The other one has flexibility, liquidity, and choices, not to mention a much smaller mortgage payment, I would imagine. So instead of asking, am I a millionaire? A better question for you to ask is this: how much of my wealth can actually support my lifestyle through good and bad markets? Because retirement isn't a net worth contest. It's about generating a consistent paycheck month over month. So let's talk through a retirement paycheck framework for you. First, you're going to want to separate your balance sheet into three buckets, like we've been talking about. First bucket's going to be your financial assets. Second's going to be your home equity. Then the third will be your guaranteed income sources. Financial assets are things like your 401k, IRA, Roth IRA, brokerage, cash, anything like that that can be invested and used to create retirement spending income. Your home equity is what you have left over if you sold your home today and paid off your mortgage, if you still have one. And then your guaranteed income sources are going to be sources of money that show up regardless. So I think maybe a pension if you're lucky enough to have one, Social Security, maybe an annuity if you were sold one as well. This step matters because those three buckets behave very differently, and confusing them is where a lot of millionaires get anxiety from. Now, second, you are going to want to be honest about what actually will function like a paycheck, and that's the root of this video. Financial assets are your income engine. They can be turned into spending without changing your living situation. Your home equity is optional leverage, but it's not automatic income. It can absolutely improve your retirement, whether through downsizing, relocating, maybe renting out part of your home, like we said, or using the home equity strategically. But like I keep saying, these options usually require major decisions, major trade-offs, and proper timing. So for planning purposes, I'd encourage you to treat your home like a plan B lever, not as part of the primary paycheck engine that we're talking through. And then third is going to be to define what I call your retirement paycheck number. This isn't just what you spend today, it's what you want to spend per year after taxes, plus real world categories that surprise people the first few years in retirement, like larger than expected healthcare premiums, traveling, helping adult kids, and the irregular stuff like cars, furniture, home repairs, and big one-time purchases. Early retirees often underestimate this because they're only thinking about monthly bills that they're incurring while they're still working. Retirement planning really needs an annual number that's going to include all the lumpy expenses as well. And then fourth, once you have your paycheck number, you can back into a clearer target by subtracting out your predictable income sources. Start with your paycheck number, then subtract your guaranteed income sources like Social Security, maybe your pension. And what is left over is your portfolio paycheck gap. That's the amount that your financial assets are going to need to generate to cover your lifestyle expenses. And this is where pre-retirees get real value. If you're retiring before Medicare or before Social Security kicks in, your gap might be larger than for a few years and then shrink later on in your plan. So instead of just one general retirement plan or income strategy, you're often building a two-phase plan. The first phase is your bridge years plan, and then the second phase is your later on retirement plan. So don't be scared if your withdrawal rate on your financial assets for the first few years of retirement is in the 6 or 7% range until those guaranteed income sources kick in, such as pension at 65 or Social Security between 62 and 70. In your fifth and final step, you're going to need to validate your plan with stress tests. Rather than relying on the old millionaire label, you're going to need to model outcomes under realistic adverse scenarios, such as a difficult sequence of risk returns earlier on in retirement, longevity maybe extending into the mid-90s when you thought maybe just the mid to late 80s, and then maybe higher than expected taxes or healthcare costs or things like that that might pop up that you weren't initially planning for. The objective is to confirm that your income strategy remains sustainable and that you retain levers to adjust in real time, such as spending flexibility, right? If the market drops, do you have guardrails to let you know how much to reduce your spending by and for how long? And maybe withdrawal sequencing and maybe timing of major expenses. That's why the millionaire label isn't very useful in planning, right? It's a static snapshot or really just a title that people throw around. A retirement income plan, on the other side, is a dynamic system that's going to be designed to perform across different environments for you and for your family. So once you do this, the question does change from am I a millionaire, like we said, to do I have enough income producing assets, plus a housing plan, plus a tax-aware withdrawal strategy to support the life I want? That's what actually predicts retirement confidence. And it's why two households can have the exact same net worth, and completely different retirement experiences. Now you know why so many retiree millionaires look wealthy on paper but still worry about cash flow, because much of their wealth might be tied up in their homes. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Once you do build $1 to $2 million portfolio, the biggest risk often isn't the market anymore. It's how your income is going to show up on your tax return. So if you want to learn why crossing $2 million changes everything for you and how your tax return can quietly become the steering wheel of your retirement, click this next video.